Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. My questions are for B'nai B'rith. Thank you again for being here today. Just a little bit of background. I wasn't familiar with anti-Semitism. I grew up in rural Manitoba. It wasn't something that we were really exposed to. But I later went to McGill University, and my first exposure to this was there was large, from my perspective, very angry protest for the boycott, divest, sanction movement, or whatever you'd like to call it. So that's where I first started learning about these issues, and those images of seeing those protests really stayed with me. And I know recently McGill University is in quite a bit of hot water regarding their student society. There's a news release on your website that refers to how this student society recently voted to adopt an extreme Palestine solidarity policy, which is a document that accuses Israel of engaging in settler colonial apartheid against Palestinians and commits SMU, the student society, to boycott all entities it calls complicit in this activity. And your interpretation of that is that the document is so broad that it may compel the student society to boycott virtually all Jewish clubs and associations on campuses. So I have considerable concerns with this and the impact on Jewish students, both at McGill but in all universities across Canada. And I'd just like you to comment on the impact this has on Jewish students and what this is like for them to attend university under these circumstances.
I'm going to let Michael Mostyn begin this. I'd be happy to add a few words. Has been his file.
Sure. Thank you very much. So this is absolutely something of great concern to the Jewish community, and certainly to Jewish students on campus, also to their parents. Nobody should have to go on a university campus and deal with issues other than getting a great education here in Canada. But unfortunately, Jewish students are regularly made to feel unsafe on campus in various ways. It could be by through the political process of unions, and there have been updates at McGill since then. But this is something that we note on campuses across Canada. They contact our organization, they contact other Jewish organizations, and basically, a lot of it comes down to the fact that Jews are forced to often defend themselves in the face of others proposing who and what they are and what they think, because of their connection as Jews to the Jewish state of Israel. So Zionism is often treated as a dirty term on campus, and because you're Jewish or you appear to be Jewish, you may get treated with different forms of abuse. And in fact, at the University of Toronto, they had a couple of times where student unions would take the position that even kosher food, which is a religious commandment for Jews, should be negatively impacted. It shouldn't be allowed if you hold a certain political ideology, that of Zionism. Zionism, of course, something that in the high 90% of Jews in Canada are Zionists. That is the overall connection between our communities. So it is something that's disturbing. BDS, we consider
if I can just,
anti-Semitic.
Sorry to interrupt, but just on that point, actually, in 2017, a member of the SMU's, the Student Society's Legislative Council and Board of Directors, as you put it on your website, infamously told Twitter, and I actually remember this, to punch a Zionist today, quote. Is that something that your students experience? Is there violence they're experiencing?
We do get reports of threats, rarely actual violence on campus, but we do get reports of threat. But we should all be worried. This year's audit revealed the number of violent incidents against Jews in Canada went up from 9 in 2020 to 75 in 2021, a 733% increase. While at McGill, the Board of Trustees annulled the Student Society motion, clearly, there's been a movement at certain campuses to make anti-Semitism the new form of, anti-Zionism the new form of anti-Semitism, denying the rights of Jews to self-determination in their historic homeland, and basically attacking Jews everywhere for decisions made by Israel. I'd like to say that in 2016, you may recall, Parliament passed an anti-BDS motion. We think a parliament might want to update that. In Germany and Austria and certain countries, advocating BDS is actually illegal. In Canada, the motion adopted by parliament had no legal force.
Thank you. I did want to ask you in terms of the impact, if you think that there's a connection between these movements on university campuses and protests that we see in support of the BDS movement. For example, in Toronto, as I'm sure you're aware, recently there was a large protest within from the BDS perspective. They were chanting things like "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and that's in reference to a one-state solution. So can you comment if you think that there is a connection between these elements that are happening on university campuses and these extremist, hateful, the rhetoric that we're seeing in many of these protests in Toronto and elsewhere?
Well,
I do.
Yeah, we both do. And that is how it's felt generally within the Jewish community. We've been, as a community, complaining for years, if this is allowed on campus, if you are allowed to discriminate, and if universities are not enforcing their own policies to protect their students and their faculty and their administrations, then eventually we will see spillover into general society.
Thank you.
We saw that happen.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but with thank you. With my last 15 seconds, can you just, in sum, what role does government play in addressing this issue? And in 15 seconds. Thank you.
Canada has to support the two-state solution as it has done recently, reiterating that Canada has to denounce efforts to portray Israel as an apartheid state, and Canada has to push for democratic expression in Palestine to allow the Palestinian people to finally have voices that represent them.
And implement IRA.